kick us off, just give us an introduction of who you are, what you do, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Holly Allen. I am an account executive at Deel, looking after the UK and I space. I was promoted from SDR to AE in October. So I'm still fairly new to the role, still finding my feet. But I've been in the world of sales for a good couple of years now. So I actually started out in recruitment. And I actually loved recruitment, but because of COVID and, everyone going on furlough and the uncertainty, I stepped away from recruitment. I got into SaaS. My sister is a SDR recruiter, and I could see that she was, still placing SDRs into SaaS roles. And I was like, I really want to keep working. So I got my first SDR role at a company called G2, which was an amazing first company to join and to learn the ropes. It was, and I had an incredible time there. So I was an SDR there for just over a year. I transitioned into an AE role there just for a couple months. I was living in London at the time. I wanted to move back up north. So I moved back up north. I did some SDR coaching and management for a little bit. And then decided that I really wanted to get back into an IC role. So I joined Deel last January it was. I was an SDR there for just over 9 months. Now I'm an AE and here we are.
Yeah, that's really interesting because obviously, my world's recruitment, and that's what I've been doing the last few years as well. So I'm curious to know, what differences you found with recruitment and tech sales.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely really enjoyed my time in recruitment. I really, really did. I was a graduate at the time. I was working the grad market. So the conversations I was having were very fun, and it was, I guess, my kind of first taste of sales. So I definitely really enjoyed it. I guess, what with working at Deel, what you're selling is a product as opposed to, for want of a better phrase, selling a person when you work in recruitment. And I think, I think there are a lot of similarities though. Candidates are obviously can be very unreliable. You can get someone to a final stage interview, think it's going to close, and then they drop out or they ghost you, whatever. And that is exactly the same as sales, right? You can think you've got this amazing opportunity in the pipeline, it's going to close, and then it all falls through. So I think, that kind of uncertainty and just having to kind of go with the flow and really, I guess, manage your emotions and expectations is definitely something that kind of runs in both. But I definitely did, like I say, really, really enjoy recruitment. Had kind of COVID and all of that happened. I'm not sure if I necessarily would have made the move at that point, but I'm definitely very, very happy, in SaaS now.
You mentioned it there, but what we want to talk about on this podcast is very much geared towards sort of mental health and stress and anxiety and all that good stuff in sales. How did you find COVID in terms of your mental health?
Yeah, I mean, and I feel almost kind of guilty for saying this, in that it was obviously a very sad, difficult time for a lot of people. But I think actually during lockdown, I was at home with my family, my sister was there. And so the kind of day to day, we were going out, we were getting our steps in, we were doing the 5K running challenges and all that kind of thing. So I think that for me was fine. Obviously it was, horrible not being able to leave the house for X amount of hours a day and all that kind of thing. And I appreciate there was a lot, worse going on for other families and other people. But I think for me, when I kind of really became aware of my mental health, and I don't think it was necessarily COVID that impacted that. It was after lockdown had lifted, I relocated to London. So from Manchester, I relocated to London for my job at G2. So I was still an SDR then. And I think initially, when I first moved to London, I was really in that honeymoon phase of just absolutely loving it, new city, lockdown had lifted. So the restrictions had lifted, which was all great. And And I was definitely in that honeymoon phase. And then probably about 6 months in to London, and my move there, I just suddenly was like, wow, like I feel a way that I've never ever felt before. And it's quite funny because I have had, friends in the past, or I've known people in the past that have struggled with their mental health, people that I've had friends that would tell me, oh, I couldn't get out of bed today. I spent all day in bed. Like I just couldn't face it. And I would be thinking like, what the hell? Like, why couldn't you get out of bed? Like, that's just laziness. Like, that's what I would always think. I just couldn't understand it. And then suddenly I found myself in this shared house in London, the kind of life that I'd always wanted. And I was like, it was like the honeymoon phase was just over. And I was suddenly I felt very anxious. I felt very stressed. I felt the stress of the job. I'd gone through a breakup as well. I was in this new city, kind of like on my own. And suddenly I was like, okay, now I think I understand what this whole mental health thing is about, what anxiety feels like. Even, like depression, I really kind of suddenly understood it. So yeah, that's kind of when it all really started for me.
That's interesting. So you never had any like signs of it growing up, like as a child, or maybe in secondary school or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are definitely kind of, maybe things from my childhood, like childhood traumas that maybe I'd kind of like suppressed for a while. And then suddenly when I was in London and I was, in this kind of very brand new situation. And like I say, I was really on my own. Like my parents had moved abroad. I was the only person in my family that was in the UK as well. So I think that was a kind of added stress and added pressure. And yeah, that was the kind of like first real signs of it. And I remember one Christmas, the first Christmas since I'd moved to London, I remember we'd gone on a family holiday because my parents were living abroad at the time. So we'd gone to stay with them. And I just remember that first night, like being at the dinner table, my sister was there, who I'm super close with. And I think at the time I just wanted to like run away. Like to me, running away was just the answer to like solve all my problems. And I think I'd said to her in a WhatsApp message, like, oh, like maybe I'll just, quit my job and go to Australia. Like maybe I should do that. And I remember her saying at the dinner table, like, oh, so are you thinking about going to Australia? And my mum and dad had no idea that this thought had even come into my head. And my mum was like, what? And then I just burst into tears. And it was just like, I just had no idea what was going on, what I was feeling, where I wanted to be. All I knew was that I felt really, really alone. And I think that is something that's, really, really tough when it comes to when you are feeling depressed, when you are feeling anxious. You can have all of these people around you. I've, always had lots of friends that are amazing, but I think that feeling of loneliness is something that is so hard to kind of overcome and to really like understand internally as well. And that was just the overwhelming feeling that I had. And I just wanted to like run away from everything. And I think in essence, that was what I ended up doing, in that I left London, which was definitely a good decision for me. Like, I think London just wasn't my place. I live in Manchester now. I absolutely love it. But I left London. I went back to like a previous relationship that I definitely shouldn't have gone back to, but I think it was just that kind of comfort. I'd just been promoted at G2. I went back into the SDR world as well. So I really kind of, in a lot of ways, moved forward in that I realized, okay, London isn't for me. I think I probably wasn't fully ready for that AE role either. But I guess in a lot of ways, I did kind of regress because I was just seeking comfort and I was just seeking, to kind of go back and feel that comfort and that, not to be lonely again.
What was your journey like from then on then? Because that was that like a couple of years ago that sort of kicked in, and then how have you been since then?
Yeah, so honestly, very, very up and down, like very, very up and down. So I'll have, 3 months where I feel amazing and I feel great and the world is great. And I think, this is something that I've definitely overcome. And then I have moments where I just feel really, really like low, and I can't even really explain, nothing's necessarily triggered it. I don't know where it's come from. And I think that, in those moments, the kind of overwhelming feeling really is that loneliness. And I think that, when you work in sales, it can be so difficult, because I've had mornings where like I'll wake up, I'll feel really emotional, I'll be crying for no reason, can't kind of control how I'm feeling. But then you have to get on a call and you have to do a demo, and you have to, it's almost like putting on a bit of a performance in a way. Like you just have to kind of block out all of that. And I think that, that is part of having a job, and, you have to show up for work and whatnot. And obviously there are some things that you do have to kind of leave at home, if you like. But I think that in sales, it's even more difficult, because you could get on that demo and the person could be super, super rude to you, or super disinterested, or I definitely, when I do feel low, I often get feelings of like not feeling good enough, and imposter syndrome. And I think sometimes on calls I just immediately think, oh, this person isn't gonna trust me, or that they're not going to think I'm smart enough to be able to run this call, or they're not going to buy into the product because it's me that's trying to sell it, and all those thoughts and feelings. And I think sometimes it is really, really hard in sales, when I am feeling like that, to just kind of not let it get to me, and not be a nervous wreck on all my calls.
So how did like anxiety specifically affect your sales ability? And then what methods and techniques have you learned or have you developed to actually overcome it, that maybe people listening who've got the same problem could use?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember, God, I will never forget this day. I remember when I was an SDR at G2, and it was when I was going through that very sad stage of my life when I lived in London. I remember I had a call with, I can't remember who the company was. And it was a Zoom call, and it was, I think this lady had come inbound, and I was like qualifying the call as the SDR. And this lady was just like, she was really, really rude. Like, she was very direct. She was really annoyed that she'd been put through to an SDR and that I was qualifying and I couldn't, tell her pricing and all the rest of it. And I remember I think I'd been like really feeling really sad in the morning. And then we got on the call and she was just like going in on me. And I had to turn my camera off while on the call because I started crying. And I just said something to her like, oh, sorry, the internet's really bad. And it was obvious that I'd turned off my camera, but it was horrible. I couldn't get off that call fast enough. And then I remember the call ended, and then all I could think about was, oh my God, this call's going to be on Gong. Like, everyone in the company is going to see how like badly I dealt with that. And it was just a whole thing. And I think, do you know what? I think I contemplated messaging my manager asking if the call could be taken down, but then that also brought me like so much shame, because I was like, oh my God, I just can't believe I've got upset on a call. Like, maybe no one will notice if I just don't say anything. So, and that is something that will stick with me forever. And I remember after that happened thinking, I am never going to put myself in this position again. So what I do now is, of course, like, I always make sure that I go into calls as prepared as I possibly can. Like, if I've got a call with, I don't know, a CFO that I'm really, really nervous about, and I get super nervous for calls, whether I'm having a good day or a bad day, I just make sure that I go in, I always have, like, I never read off a script in calls, but I always have like some sort of script PDF open, just so that should I need to, if I get really tongue tied, I know I can swipe across my screen and I've got something there that I can fall back on. And I think that, like, the other part of it is, sometimes like coming into a WeWork can help. Being around people, sometimes that can like actually help, but sometimes it is a case of, do you know what, today I need to stay in the comfort of my flat. I don't want to see anyone. I just want to be at my kitchen table. I want to kind of take the day like fairly easy. And it really is just a case of like getting through the day. And if I can do that, that's an achievement. So for me, it's just understanding, how do I feel, what is going to help, what's going to potentially stress me out more. And I think for me as well, things like, it sounds really obvious, but things that do really impact me is like alcohol. Like if I've been like drinking a lot, I can guarantee that I won't feel great. Lack of sleep, if I don't train, like go to the gym as much as I normally do, all of this stuff does really impact me. And, I'm not saying I'd never go out and drink, like far from it. But if I do, and I take it a bit far or whatever, I know in my head, like, okay, the reason why I feel really bad today is because of this. It will pass. So yeah.
Something you mentioned just there that personally helped me as well is like having a structure and a like script.
Yeah, I guess like on and off, like for cold calls, something that gives me a lot of anxiety, I'll obviously always have a script to follow. But I think it was really like coming into this new role. What I really recognized from when I moved into the AE role at G2 was when I had like imposter syndrome, like I'd never felt it before. I remember two of us had been promoted at the same time, and this could have just been, it probably was just in my head, but to me, I felt an enormous amount of pressure to like close the first deal, be the first one to achieve X, do X, Y, Z, whatever. And I remember just feeling like I'm not good enough. This colleague is so much better than me. It was horrendous. And that's why, I did like leave that role. I guess you could say like I ran away from that role rather than trying to work through it. And so I think coming into this role at Deel, moving into the AE role, yes, it's a step up. But I really, really just want to make sure that I'm setting myself up for success. I don't ever want to go back to those feelings again. Because, with hindsight now, like, do I regret leaving that role? Like, I partly, like, if I'd have stayed, what would have happened? I don't know. Obviously very, very happy to be at Deel now, but it's just one of those things where I thought, God, I'm never going to let myself get into that rut again, where I literally leave a job because I don't feel good enough. Like, that is just ridiculous. So I think from that now, like I say, when I go onto calls, I want to feel confident. I want to know what I'm talking about. And so I'm always going to help myself out, have those little kind of cue cards, those scripts. But I think as well, on the point of having that structure, being in control, I think that is also something that definitely helps me with, anxiety. And when I am having those kind of low patches, is having a routine. So like on my fridge, I have like a calendar, a Monday to Friday. And I fill it in, like I have loads of whiteboard markers in different colors, like it's very fun. And I'll just fill in, like Monday, I'm going to do this. And I'll just have everything on there. And it's almost quite therapeutic, like working through the week, either, crossing it off what you've done and just knowing like, okay, like I've nearly made it through the week, I'm fine, or whatever, and just having some like nice events on there and stuff. I think having that plan really definitely helps me. And like I say, at the end of the week, I just feel such a sense of achievement in that I'm like, okay, this is everything I've done this week. Even if it's something like, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'll go into the WeWork, I'll cook this for dinner. If I can get to the end of the week and know like, okay, you've stuck to that plan, all is well, the house hasn't burned down, you are fine, you're safe, then that gives me a massive sense of comfort, achievement, accomplishment.
I've got a topic I want to discuss with you as well. I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. So, obviously, you're a massive advocate of remote working, right? And you obviously went to Bali. Yeah. How long did you go to Bali again?
3 months. It was meant to be 1 month. Then I was meant to never come back. And then I called it a day at 3 months.
Yeah, cool. So, first of all, I'm curious to see like how you found that, and did it make your mental health and anxiety worse, or?
Yeah, this is a very interesting one. So for context, I work at Deel. We have a work from anywhere policy, which is amazing for someone like me that loves to travel and I love the sun. So it's great. So in August, I headed to Bali, and I was meant to just be there for a month, and ended up staying there for 3 months. And when I first got there, for like I'd say probably like the first 6 weeks, I was, again, in that honeymoon phase of, this is amazing. I'm in the sunshine. Like, I'm at the beach. Like, everything is just incredible here. Oh my God, all my problems are solved. Like, this is great. And I was actually thinking, so I remember telling you, like, I was actually thinking about, do I move here full time? Do I get rid of my flat in Manchester? Like, all these very kind of drastic thoughts going through my head. And then, kind of out of the blue, literally out of nowhere, in my last month of Bali, it was probably one of the like hardest couple of weeks I have ever had. It was just really, really tough. And it was so strange because I'd got the news about my promotion. So I was so happy about being promoted. Like, it's something that I've wanted for so long. And that was just like, really, really happy about that. And then I just couldn't like shake off this feeling. It was just so weird. Like, I would go outside, the heat was just unbearable. Like, I felt like I couldn't breathe when I was outside. I didn't want to be around anyone. Like, that's kind of my biggest thing when I go through these low patches, is I just want to isolate myself, shut myself off from the world. So, someone could come and, I don't know, sit next to me at a restaurant and just like be making polite conversation, and I would just be probably quite rude back, to be honest, because I just did not want to engage in any conversation with them. And I didn't feel good in myself. Like, it was just a really, really difficult time. And I think it really showed me that, again, it was this case of, I'd kind of come to Bali and almost, I guess, run away from not any problems like in Manchester. Like, I have a great life, but I think probably just a lot of internal demons, shall we say, that, things that you can't really run away from. And I think that it really showed me that almost like enough is enough. And I was like, okay, do you know what? I actually really need to work on these things internally. I need to figure out, why I get a little bit sad every now and then. Like, what is it that is kind of causing it? How can I better manage it so that, I'm not in a situation where I have to kind of run away to the other side of the world, which is, fine, because I can do it. And don't get me wrong, I had an amazing time. But I think, again, it was just that feeling of like, God, I'm in Bali. Like, this is the kind of world I've wanted to be in for so long. Like, it's finally happening. And yet I still feel alone. I still feel sad. Like, what the hell is wrong with me? But after that happened, it did prompt me to, so I didn't even know this existed, but I found this happiness coach on Instagram, so I had a couple sessions. I'm going to be honest, it didn't work out. It just wasn't for me. But the fact is, I made a step in the right direction. I learned a lot about myself in the couple of sessions that we did have. And it was just it's more of an action than I've ever taken before, which made me feel good.
What I wanted to ask as well, just on the note of just the fact that you can even do remote working, what do you feel like companies can do, hiring managers can do, CEOs can do to support people better within the sales community with mental health?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I think obviously a lot of the pressure comes around, you've got this quota, like, how are you going to hit it? And if you're not hitting it, then it's like, well, yeah. But I think, like, certainly at Deel, my manager, and I'm not just saying this, my manager is unbelievable. Like, he's just like, I literally do feel so grateful to work with him. But he's really great in the sense of, we'll come into our one-to-ones and it'll be like, okay, this is your target for this month. Like, how are we going to get there? What have you got on? And if you're sat in there thinking like, oh my God, I actually don't know where, this month's quota is going to come from. It's a case of like, okay, let's work together. Let's get you to quota. Like, how can I help? So I think not just, I guess, just kind of helping where you can, like helping the reps where you can. And he never makes me feel like I don't know, like that there's just always a constant sense of like encouragement and come on, like you can do this, I believe in you. And I genuinely do feel like he does believe in me, which for someone that doesn't always believe in herself is really, really nice to feel like that. I think as well, like celebrating the small wins. Like I closed my first deal this morning actually, which I was super happy about. And thank you. And it was quite a small deal, but like a deal's a deal. And he just like hyped me up, made me feel really good about it. And it, for me, I was just like, yes, like this just feels so positive. We're moving in the right direction. I can do this. But I think as well, so something that I've started doing this year, which this isn't kind of mindset related, but I do want to give a shout out to my sales coach. So I have external sales coaching from Mark Ackers at My Sales Coach, which is honestly amazing. And I think like even just investing in myself, investing in those training sessions has helped me massively, because again, it makes me think like, if I don't feel good enough, I'm like, well, what can I do to make me feel better about myself? Okay, let me invest in an amazing sales coach. And that has helped me massively. So anyone that, does kind of want additional support in sales, or I think they even do like CS coaching, would definitely recommend My Sales Coach. But I think maybe a kind of similar program to that, but for kind of mindset would be something I think would be like super valuable, because you like, if I'm having a bad day, I love my manager, but I'm not going to get on a call and tell him how I'm, really feeling. And like, it's not, it's not, I think it depends, but, for me personally, it just wouldn't feel appropriate. And so I think something like an additional service of like, even if it's someone that you just meet with once a month, how is the month really going? Like, how are you actually feeling? Just to offload, almost speak to someone that, because you don't as well, you don't always want to tell your friends. And so I think just having that would be amazing.
One thing I definitely want to speak to you about as well, just to sort of close this off, is your personal brand on LinkedIn and your journey with doing that, and how that sort of affected your mental health in a positive and a negative way. So what's your journey been like in terms of building a personal brand? And how have you dealt with the negative side of those things, like trolls?
Yeah, so I think that I guess like some of the challenges is definitely when you're not feeling great, like we've talked about, like the last thing you want to do sometimes is have to put on a post on LinkedIn and like pretend that everything is fine. And I think as well, like for me with LinkedIn, I always try and be authentic. Like my posts are, they're not like marketing material regurgitated. They are very much me. And I think like that would be my biggest tip for anyone looking to build a personal brand, is like make it you. Like it's called a personal brand for a reason. And so that's what I always try and do. But obviously, whatever you're going through at home, like LinkedIn is still a professional platform. So you're not going to kind of come on and air all of that on LinkedIn, that it doesn't make sense. But I think sometimes that's difficult, and when I am like feeling a bit anxious, it can be really hard to think up ideas of what to post. But I think it's just like being kind to yourself and being like, do you know what, if I don't post on LinkedIn today, like it's not the end of the world. But I think it's just important as well to reiterate this point around, people might come onto my LinkedIn and think like all my posts recently are obviously me in Bali. They might look and see like, oh my God, she's been in Bali. That's amazing. She got promoted. Like, everything's great. And all my photos, I'm smiling. But I think it's just a reminder that you often really don't actually know how someone is really feeling. And it's just like, when you cold call someone and they're a bit rude, people often say like, look, you really don't know what this person has had to deal with this morning or what's happened. And I think it's just important to kind of remember that. But I think in terms of, kind of trolls, weird comments, I've definitely been lucky in that I don't deal with a lot of that. I don't think maybe I've had a couple of like mean comments in the past, but you just go on, you just delete them. God, I'm probably going to jinx myself now, but I've been really lucky in that none of them have ever felt too like personal, or, you know, so you just have to like separate yourself from it and just delete them, move on. Anyone that messages you that's like, I don't know, saying something that, like I say, I never really get comments that maybe sometimes there'll be some things that you think this is a bit strange or this makes you feel a bit uncomfortable, but I would just delete the person, block them. But yeah, I mean, I could be completely wrong, but my experience with LinkedIn is that it's a lot less trolley than like Instagram, for example. I know categorically I could not deal with like, if I had a big Instagram following and some of the comments and hate that people get on Instagram and TikTok. Oh my God, I know I could not deal with that. I'm very, very sensitive. So that would crush me.
Do you think even just being on social media and like having that presence, knowing people are looking at you, has that helped you in a positive way? Like, have you developed, I don't know, thicker skin, or do you care less about what people think, that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I think it has helped in the sense of, you know, like from a sales perspective, like I get a lot of inbounds from LinkedIn. I get really good responses from my messaging on LinkedIn. And I do believe, you know, that is all down to having a personal brand. And so I guess, you know, that does make me feel really, really good. I think one of the kind of difficult times for me was like when I had left G2, and I'd done like a year prior, I'd done all this posting about moving to London and blah, blah, blah. And then it was like, oh, now I'm actually moving back to Manchester. And then, you know, like going back to Deel as an SDR as well. That was something I was like terrified to tell LinkedIn about, which is so silly, but you know, obviously it does kind of come with its consequences in that sense, just thinking like, oh my God, what will people think? But all in all, like having a personal brand, yeah, it's been fab. And if I ever have done posts where, you know, maybe I talk about it's been a really tough month in sales or not feeling amazing because of XYZ, like I think people normally are very supportive. Normally people can resonate. And yeah, that kind of brings me a bit of like comfort as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is why I think it's so brilliant that you've even agreed to talk about this kind of stuff on a podcast. Because I think someone like yourself who is obviously, you know, successful, like you said, if you went on your LinkedIn profile, it's that whole their life looks perfect kind of thing. And I think it's great that you're talking about this, because I'm sure a lot of people will see this and they'll feel a lot better within themselves. So yeah, no, really appreciate you talking about it, and I'm sure a lot of people do as well. I've just got one last question. If you could go back to Holly of like 4 or 5 years ago, what advice would you give her, or words of encouragement?
Oh, I love this question. So I think the like number one thing would probably be don't be so hard on yourself. I think there've been times where I've just completely been so like mean to myself, stressed myself out for like virtually no reason. And I just think I would go back and just be like, you are doing great. Like, stop being so mean. Just keep on going. So I think that would be one. I think as well, like comparison is the thief of joy. And I think this is, again, in sales, it can be so toxic because, you know, every company has like a leaderboard of all the reps and where they are and who's first and who's last and who's in the middle. And I think that like comparing yourself, like, yes, having a bit of healthy competition is great. Like learning from others is great, but literally comparing yourself down to the ground, I just think is so unhealthy. And whether that's in work, whether that's, you know, looking at my friends that are maybe at later stages in their lives or whatever, I just think you are on your own path. And I'm a big believer in like, you are exactly where you are meant to be. Even if something like doesn't really make sense now, you know, if one of my friends, I don't know, buys a house, gets married, whatever, I'll be like, oh my God, I'm still renting, I'm single, like whatever it could be. But I think that you just have to like believe in yourself, trust the process. You are meant to be where you are, and yeah, stop being so hard on yourself, I think.